Mabuhay at magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Trish Wizenhunt. Hello and good afternoon to you all. My name is Trish Wizenhunt. Velina mai meke aloha eke lehu lehu. We are Ka'aha Lahui o Olikona Hawaiian Civic Club of Oregon and Southwest Washington, a nonprofit organization with a mission to actively participate in the promotion, perpetuation, and practice of the Native Hawaiian culture and values. One of our goals is to participate in activities which promote the civic, economic, health, education, and social welfare of our community, and particularly the activities of those agencies and clubs who are responsible for the improvement of the conditions of the people in the community. Through these efforts, we would like to welcome Na Kamaliʻi Talk Story, a program offering a safe place for open discussion and conversations around social justice, equity and equality, cultural appropriation, climate change, and education that will be led and driven by today's youth. Today's discussion, we would like to talk about how our actions are changing the world. Many youth's attention is on how we take care of the world we live in and the best ways to do that. NASA global climate change evidence has shown us that the atmospheric carbon dioxide hasn't been as high as it is now for millennia. The warming trend has greater than a 95% probability that the change is caused by human activity. Many have heard of sustainable living, and the question is, how can we achieve it as the next generation? There are many indigenous cultures that have been living sustainably and can be an example of how the world can be the change to save our earth. With that being said, please help me welcome today's host, Kina. Aloha, Kina.
Mahalo, Mama. Aloha, my name is Kina. I am an incoming 5th grader in the Hillsborough School District, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. We would like to welcome all of you to what we hope will become a safe and open platform for many of our students and peers out there. Before we get started with today's panel discussion, as a member of this community here in Oregon, I would like to acknowledge and mahalo the land and its people which we sit and occupy. The Portland metro area rests on traditional village sites of Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who have made their homes along the Columbia River, creating communities and summer encampments to harvest and use the plentiful natural resources of the area. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. To learn more about Portland's native, diverse, and vibrant history, please read Leading with Tradition, a document created by Portland Indian Leaders Roundtable. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce and welcome our panelist who is joining us today. ʻAnakalā Lanakila Mangauil is Kanaka Maoli, Filipino, Irish, and Scottish son of Hamakua, Honoka'a on Hawaii Island. After graduating from Kanu'oka Aina Charter School, ʻAnakalā Lanakila became an educator in Hawaii public schools. For well over a decade, he has provided Hawaiian cultural education to Hawaii's youth from pre-K through 12th grade, as well as sharing with many colleges, local and abroad. Responding to the growing demand for learning in the community, he has founded the Hawaiian Cultural Center of Hamakua, or HCCOH, in 2014, and continues to serve as its executive director and head instructor. Through HCCOH, ʻAnakalā Lanakila continues to provide cultural education to local schools and to communities across the Pai'aina and internationally. He has also been an integral alakai leader and kia'i protector of Mauna Kea, and has assumed the kuleana of continuing to unify the people of Hawaii through cultural revival and education. ʻAnakalā Lanakila is devoted to Hawaii and remains committed to protecting and reviving the health of the Aina, the land, and Hawaii's communities. Aloha, ʻAnakalā Lanakila.
Aloha no, mahalo e kina. Aloha no kako. It's an honor to be able to come on and share mana'o today with all of you. I do want to begin with a short apology. I had a little miscommunication with a friend today, so I'm on the road for a little while. So if I have to cut in and out of my picture screen, I'm just having to do a quick delivery, but you have my full attention. But Miki aloha nui a oko, aloha.
Mahalo nui loa for being here today. As we begin, a friendly reminder to please mute while you are not talking. Please raise your hand so that we can call upon you. And please feel free to be completely open and honest. Let's get started. Personal opinions and experiences. I would like to begin our discussion by asking the first question. Sustainable living describes a lifestyle that attempts to reduce an individual's or society's use of Earth's natural resources and one's personal resources. What does sustainable living mean to you?
Sustainable living. It's very important, I think, that we understand the concept of sustainability has to do with understanding that in our consumption, we also need to give back, reciprocation. Yeah, we have to give in order to receive. I think that's something we can see in almost every native people, every indigenous culture always had that reciprocation process. So it just has to equal out the equation where if we're going to use something, how do we make sure that we can replenish it? What we have fallen into today in the sense of being unsustainable is the fact that we are using resources at a much higher rate than the natural resources can replenish itself. And we are doing very little to nothing to actually give back to assist the natural process in restoring itself. So sustainability for me is really about getting ourselves back into balance with that give back. A real basic analogy that my kupono shared with me, 4 is the sacred number. Our kupuna counted with the spaces of our fingers. So we give, you give, you give, you gather. You give, you give, you give, you gather. By always being able to give back, and that's in the way of tending to a place, feeding a place, and protecting a place, it is always able to reproduce actually very plentifully, and then we are able to always have the resources needed. So finding that stability and realigning ourselves in that reciprocation, that is where we're going to find ourselves back in sustainability.
Thank you. I really understand my question now and how giving and taking can be really important. Our next question comes from Haley.
ʻAnakalā Lanakila, how can our kupuna or elder stories, lessons, and actions affect our thoughts of living sustainably?
Well, I think we need to look a little bit about when we say our kupuna stories, to be open-minded as to what that is. It is not only, especially for us in this day and age of the world, and for us our younger generations, we have, and those of us who are multi-ethnic like myself, we have many different kupuna stories to pull from. We don't only have to choose of one. It doesn't only have to be the Hawaiian one. And then it doesn't only have to be, you have all of our lineages you can pull from, as well as the collective histories of the world. One of the most important things that we need to remember is that we are part of a world society, and in that we have the ability to tap and pull in the resources to help us through many different situations today. So as far as kupuna mo'olelo of Hawaii, as an example, one of the strongest reasons I stand and I support and I perpetuate this mo'olelo one is I am Kanaka. But probably even more important to that is that I live in Hawaii. So the stories of the people of this place is the collective history uh, of observation, scientific observation, historical accounts. All those things are intertwined in these mo'olelo of the kupuna of this place. And so by listening to those mo'olelo, they can help to remind us of what the environment, what a healthy environment or a healthy Hawaii environment once looked like. So they can help to guide us on how kind of our goals of what we need to get ourselves back to in some cases. It relays to us an understanding of how the people, how our kupuna were able to live in these areas and to be able to gather from this place. Because you look at our stories, you know, Hawaiians were not surviving on our islands. We were thriving. We had such abundance. And even in some, most of our islands, like here on Hawaii Island, the population was actually greater in the 1700s on this island than our current population. Yet somehow we are exacerbating most of all the resources. So there's a template that's held in many of these mo'olelo. Even just hearing mo'olelos of where Hi'iaka journeyed and how they describe the lands that she passed through. Because I'm here right now, I'm actually driving through the pastures of Waimea, which if we go back to our kupuna stories, you know, we have different layers and history of kupuna. If we only go back 1 or 2 generations, we're not going to be able to find what this place was in a healthy time. We're going to hear of only the paniolo, of the cattle wrestling and all that, and these beautiful Waimea pastures. But if you listen to the mo'olelo that go back a little further, stories of Kamiki and Kamaka'iole, of Hi'iaka, the mo'olelo even of Kamehameha, you look at these lands through another layers and you realize, wow, what happened? Where these stories tell us of verdant, thick forests. Now we see open lands as far as Mauna Kea. So when we are looking as to why is our fish resource, why is there not so much fish in our oceans? Perhaps there's not much nutrients in the mountains as there once were. So listening to the mo'olelo of our kupuna is also to understand and have the history, the information and the accounts of what a healthy environment looks like. So that when we look at each generation has responsibility of looking at the resources available to us, but also understanding at what condition they're at. Many of us, when we look at Hawaii today, say, oh, but there's so much here. When you know what Hawaii was, even only 100, 200 years ago, you realize we are not dealing with a full cup. The cup is very, very close to empty already. So if we continue to behave as if it's a full cup, then we are quickly going to wipe what's left of the resources. So for me, it's been a very, very important thing to always refer back to the mo'olelo, to look back into the stories of places and how the people engage with that place. And then for 2 parts, to curve and give us a better understanding of how we can better be able to interact that ha'aviaku ha'avimai with the place, and also what we need to do to restore these places back so that they are able to produce the resources necessary for us. And I would just close that in saying that, so wherever we go, it's very important to listen primarily to the mo'olelo of that place. And that is something I was always taught. So when I go holo around the honua, we always carry who I am, where I come from. However, when I'm in a different place, I know that aina is different. The culture there is different. I cannot expect that I'm going to be able to grow things in one land as I do back here at home. And the mo'olelo, the people of the place, especially the native indigenous people who have not just, a 10-year scientific study or a 20-year scientific study, but literally hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of years of oral tradition, of documented history, of direct engagement with places. So I think always remember, when we look at the concept of education, as to who is telling the story. Yeah, whose mo'olelo are you listening to? Is it the one who showed up only about 100 years ago and wants to tell you what they think it is? Or do you listen to those who have been there for thousands of years? So I think it's very important as we look towards sustainability as who are you listening to?
Mahalo for your thoughts. When you said to keep an open mind and to listen, it really helped me to understand that that's how we should listen to our elder stories that can either impact or inspire us. Thank you.
Now we have a question from Kahoku.
Has there ever been a time in your life when you took your kupunas or / elders' stories for granted? Either you didn't listen or didn't consider them to be a part of life's lessons?
Oh, plenty. Plenty. That's when we get quiet growing up. I told you. Yeah, I think it's a part of everybody's, each generation has to also have a level of also experiencing on our own. We will listen, but that's where sometimes the mo'olelo and the stories or the instructions given to us by our parents, our kupuna, and even those stories that we may read, sometimes it may not be in full understanding for us. And sometimes we end up testing that water. And a lot of times, boom, oh, that's what Auntie was talking about. Okay, now I get it. And sometimes we have to, what they call a school of hard knocks. Yeah? Sometimes, learn until it's in your face. So, I would say, what's a good example? Oh, I have plenty, but, and I, just remember this thing too. So for Hawaii, remember we are an oral tradition. Yeah, it's an oral culture that we didn't have a written language. So there's particular things that when we look at mo'olelo, we have to, the process that I was raised with and how we analyze and really to go into deeper understanding of every story is a process we call makavalu. Yeah. And if you heard that term before, makavalu, maka is our eye, valu meaning like valu or the number 8. So 8 eyes. And that concept of 8 eyes is about having multiple different perspectives. How do you analyze these stories through different layers? So we were always growing up taught, like, what is like, we hear the story, what's the lesson of the story, what's the figurative or the kind of some of the kauna or hidden messages you think out of the story, and then also break it down into what's the historical content of this story, what's the scientific content of this story. There's all that's interlayered. And our kupuna were very, very unique in that unique, how do you call it? Somewhat like poetry of interlocking so much layers of information into these mo'olelo. So I think a good example for me was, growing up, we were always, I grew up in Hamakua side, Waipio Valley plenty, and we're always taught about the mo'o, especially by pools of water. Hey, maka'ala ya, if you don't just go walk, don't just go running and go jump in the pond and make big noise. You be respectful, mamba, before you upset the mo'o wahine and she suck you down. What? What is that? The mo'o, the lizard, the dragon. She could eat you. Not. Oh yeah, we say not. Okay, yeah. Okay, so one time we can go down. We were going to Nanaue. Nanaue Falls is in Waipio, and we all kind of knew. We heard the story, and we went running up there. Went for a jump in the water, and I remember one of my friends was saying too, like, "Hey, we gotta put the tea leaf. We gotta put the tea leaf." And because Kupuna always told us, make sure you go put the tea leaf in the water first. Put the tea leaf in, you say your pule and watch the tea leaf. If the tea leaf sinks, that means the mo'o is there. If the tea leaf floats, then it's my ka'i. And if it's my ka'i, then you hollow into the water. You walk into that water first and you go and you you do a swim, and you just, you know, in a kind of way of introducing yourself, allowing yourself to that place. And I was like, I'm gonna go swim and talk to the pond. Okay, yeah, whatever. Oh, okay. So us, you know, because we think we're so smart, that we can go run over there, go jump in the water, make big noise. We never listen. And the water was beautiful. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the waterfall was pumping. And oh, I remember we got we started to swim, jumped into the pond. Boom! I went whack my head right on one log underneath the water. They didn't even think about it, and I whacked my head. I was like, I came up, had a big puka, and one of the little kids was us. Instantly started getting like the river, the waterfall was pumping, which we thought was beautiful, but it was creating the suction, and he started getting pulled toward the waterfall. I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And we all went on a panic, scream, whatever, and grabbed the boy, and we all came out all battered up. Of course, we can go limp our way back to camp, and Tola started like, oh, so you met the mo'o, yeah? Mm-hmm. That's the mo'o. The idea of, you know, and not to displace that we don't have mo'o, that, but there is the mo'o as well. But also sometimes what these mo'olelo are reminding us is they're instilling a level of fear of what is unseen. Yeah. So in some stories they say the mo'o wahine would appear as a beautiful woman and entice the young men to come to her. And then when the young men go and jump in the water, they go under the water, the wahine go underneath and then she eat them. Because when we got to that pond, it was beautiful. From what we can see only with our maka above, was beautiful, was all good. And then we didn't maka'ala, we didn't pay attention, we didn't consider what is beneath. And now we've been in that pond, but obviously in some time from the last time we were there to now, a tree came down the cliff or whatever and was now submerged under the pond. So now it's like, oh, that's why aunties say you go ho'olauna first. So when you go ho'olauna and you introducing yourself and you're doing that slow, mellow swim through the pond, I would have felt that. We would have felt it with our feet and stuff. We would have thought, hey, oh, watch out, get one log over here. Some of the imagery of the mo'o sucking you down, that's what happened. The waterfall was pushing, which we thought was pretty, but we weren't thinking about the undertow or the current that it created. And the young boy who wasn't a strong swimmer was getting sucked over there. That's the image of what the mo'o is. But again, you go try to tell the kids, if they say, oh, be careful, there might be an undertow, and be careful that there might be a stick in the water. Even that goes in 1 year, out the other for us, yeah, when we hot and we like go jump in the water. So by saying, watch out, or the mo'o, the dragon gonna eat you, what? Because how else do you explain, especially to us young ones, how else can you explain or give an image of how powerful water can be? How about you give it an image like a big giant lizard serpent that's very powerful? Like, wow. So in that, the image of the mo'o is the analogy of the strength and power of flowing water. Yeah. So that is one of the best examples, I think, of where that relationship of our mo'olelo can be big slap in the a reality check for a lot of us. But I think just to draw this into the realm of sustainability, many a times you've heard from many different peoples around the world, you know, you don't go over there, you know, you're not supposed to cut down these trees, you know, you don't go into the area, you respect the trees, you know, they are elders, they are kupuna, and that whole relationship people talk about. Now, if we come in it with a capitalist mindset, like, oh, I don't care, we're going to make a good profit off of these trees. What our people were standing by with the sacredness of these trees was the actual foundation of they are responsible for the air that you breathe. They are responsible for giving the multiple habitats that create the whole food chain. What we're feeling today in the sense of climate change and all these things is the result of a number of generations turning their back on their own ancestors' stories, and or when going to another place, ignoring the stories and the teachings of the people of a place. And in that we lose that connection, that sacred relationship with especially our homes, our environments. And then when we begin to treat the environment only as a natural resource, I always say maka'ala, that word, when we look at everything as a resource. When you say resource, oh, it's something for us to use. Not always. Like our mauna, like with certain forests and certain rivers and certain ponds, you don't go there. Why? Because it is so important to keep it clean, to keep it pono, that's what we need to do. So mo'olelo in there have been trying to tell us a story for a long time. And we're living now with the repercussions of ignoring that.
Mahalo, Uncle. That's really good. And then I do agree. We do need to take into consideration about what our kupunas or elder stories really mean, and that they're a big part of life lessons. So mahalo.
Changing everyday living. Wait, no, sorry. Stories of our ancestors. This question comes from Mema.
Aloha. ʻAnakalā Lanakila. How do our kupunas elder stories contribute to why COVID is a profound virus that needs to be taken more seriously? For example, if we do not stop the virus later in the future, how would it affect the next generation, the unity between our society, and the overall outlook of our healthy honua?
Ooh, that's a very important question. I would say one of the first initial things is that this is a ma'i, yeah? This is a sickness. And for many, many, many of us, we have throughout many of our family stories and genealogies from all different parts of us, stories of dealing with ma'i, with plague, with disease, and how it can ravish a community. And especially how, like for us in Hawaii, I try to remind a lot of people too, where it's like, oh, well, I don't think it's a big deal. Let's never forget that every single one of us who may be Kanaka Maoli today, that have or descend from Kupuna of Hawaii, we are descendants of the ones that survived. From the time Captain Cook arrived in Hawaii in the 1790s to the mid 1800s, 90% of the Hawaiian population died. That's what, think about, you're standing in a room of 10 people, 9 of them die. That's how much and how many of our people died within 50 years, due predominantly to introduced foreign diseases. Things like measles and smallpox, and even the common cold was really bad and harsh to the Kanaka. And you see that same story echoed throughout many, many different Native communities. And even, we're going to go up into places like Europe. They dealt with the Black Plague and things like that decimated populations. So we need to, those very, very, very real and easy to read histories are so important, that we need to maka'ala, we need to pay attention to that. We cannot afford to ignore these warnings, or those histories. And so that's why we should be able to be more, with all the technical and technology and health medicines and all these things that we have today, we should be able to malama this situation. What we have lost, though, is true community, a true sense of taking care of each other. Now, back then, a lot of times, a lot of these big deaths in our communities is because we didn't actually understand. We didn't have these diseases. A lot of times, this was our first introduction to disease like that for a lot of our communities. And it hit us very, very hard. But as an example, some people have asked us, in Hawaii, we do the honin. We are alo ahi alo, and we share ha. Some kupuna were like, I don't ever remember seeing that growing up. I don't really remember that. But yet we see it throughout all of our cousins in Polynesia, and there's stories of that. How come then that for a number of generations right before us, they're unaccustomed to that? I've heard one kupuna share that he believes, or he read someplace, that it's because after our people began to die so much that they started to listen even to some of the doctors that were coming over who had had experience with disease, that talked about how it's contagious in that way, that our people stopped doing the ha. We stopped doing that because we understood of how that was one way of transferring the disease. So they stopped that, and that recorded from the 1800s. So a number of generations not seeing that. But when he said that, it's like, that makes very perfect sense. Our kupuna would have to adapt. You know, they would adapt to do in order to save their malama, their health. But so on another aspect too, how our mo'olelo and listening to a lot of our kupuna at this time, you know, how do we help to stop the spread of this virus? The virus is not flying around by itself. It is being transferred from people to people. So, you know, if we actually were to look back at a not too far, 100 years, you know, or even more in some places, it was not very common. It was not a common thing for people to be traversing all over, you know, crossing hundreds of miles, flying all over the place every single day, all the time. It was very uncommon. Our people stayed in their communities, and were able to sustain and survive in smaller knit communities. We were able to produce everything that we needed. I think what this COVID situation has made us do is start to really realize what is, you know, the tag word, yeah, essential. What really is essential? What is essential, and what's just something that I want? Is it really essential that you need to go to that hairstylist in the middle of the mall? Or can we find a different way to malama? Yeah. Is what your hair look like really that important right now? Yeah. And I'd say one thing, we have to really pay attention. Right now in the world, what country is the worst off? Has the most cases, the most deaths, everything right now? The US. Why? Because this country is full of some of the most arrogant, self-righteous, and selfish. That the whole culture is based on that. In so many ways, it is about self-servitude. How do I get myself ahead? The lack, in so many cases, of course, not everybody, but it's quite a common thing, a very capitalist model. We see a whole, where so many of our families are struggling just to take care of the essentials. You see others making millions and billions of dollars off of the situation, and they're okay with that. So that is where the mo'olelo of our people hopefully continue to give us a heart space to be mindful, to take care of one another during times like this. And so how do we be able to look at models of sustainable smaller communities? Because the fact that we are here in Hawaii, and even in Hawaii is a horrible example, or an example of the worst things you can do. We have complete ability to be self-sustainable here. We had millions of people living on these islands for thousands of years being self-sustainable. Yet they're still demanding that we need to keep the ports open so we can ship over all of our food, and or our economy cannot shut down, so we need to keep the planes coming in for tourists to come in coming from wherever they're coming from. And it's like, well, that is continuing to open up the spread of virus. Yeah. So there's many things where you're looking at the mo'olelo, the stories of our kupuna, but really just a lot of the common lifestyle of a lot of our kupuna from not long ago is really what we need to do. Be a little bit more self-sufficient, contain ourselves in smaller pods. We can still aloha each other. Technology, we can connect this way, but we shouldn't have to be forced to allow other things to have to come into our space, and or that we shouldn't be forced into a situation where we cannot survive without having to go out into another space. Yeah, so as much as possible, we're realizing that I guess I'll end with this. When we are supposed to be so much more advanced today, why is it that the caveman seems more sustainable than modern man today? They were able to take care of themselves right within their own vicinity. They were able to survive. They were able to feed themselves. They were able to create tools. They were able to do all these things. Yet now today, oh my God, I can't go to the store. We're gonna die. Well, obviously, we have not done we have not set up a very strong, sustainable society. So let's look forward on that.
Mahalo, Uncle. I've never thought that we should maka'ala to the things that are essential now, because to look back, you kind of have this guilt to look back how your kupuna, they were even in a more severe time for their people, and how they were able to adapt, and to see how we're the descendants of the people who were able to live. It's kind of, you create this feeling how you don't want to see your next generation to be the ones of who've survived in your family, because there's no excuses, because we have all these resources around us that we have to pick the ones that are most essential that will affect our future generations. And so to go back to where you're able to come here in Oregon for the Mana'o Mona, how you talked about Mauna Kea, I remember you saying that Mauna Kea it teaches us kapu aloha, to put our foot down, to carry ourselves in the highest condom, to elevate us and to create power in us, and to create mana in ourselves and mana in our words. So if you replace the word Mauna Kea with our kupuna, it has that same aspect, because your kupuna were because without your kupuna, you wouldn't be here today. Without your kule'iwi, you wouldn't be here today. So you kind of feel this guilt feeling when you know that your kupuna, they were able to adapt to their ma'i, which now people, they're not really considering the struggles they went through and comparing it to what's happening to us now. It's basically feeling that guilt, because you have all these resources right now. You have electronics that your kupuna didn't have back then. So mahalo for sharing your mana'o. I really learned from your response, and it'll definitely allow myself to carry that on to the keiki in the next generation. Mahalo.
One good value I think that would help a lot of us, and you touched on it, but we have a olelo no iao that speaks to this. Mahalo I ka mea loa'a. Being thankful for what we have. Yeah, when we are thankful for just and that's one thing, our kupuna never have all these things that we're dying for now. That's why different. Do you need all that right now, or is it better to think about the health and well-being of yourself and your friends and your neighbors and your family? So that value of being thankful for what we have and respectful to each other in that way. That's, I think, touching on that.
Mahalo.
Changing everyday living. We have a question from Haley.
Taking COVID-19 into consideration, what are ways we can change our everyday tasks to be more sustainable? For example, using less single plastic, gardening, composting, approaching organic and natural products, local businesses, or transportation.
All of that, yes, all that can definitely help. I think, here in Hawaii too, there's been a lot of, big push, and really around the world, a lot of people are recognizing, a lot of the younger generation recognizing that we cannot continue this. We are living in the ramifications of neglect of caring beyond oneself again. A lot of these things that we have been given or that's been made for us and has in some cases propelled a civilization forward so quickly, has also done it so quickly that we're not paying attention to its ramifications. Or it's trying to be hidden because some benefit from it. some benefit from sickness, some benefit from the health and demise of natural resources. You ever watch the Lorax? Yeah, some benefit from the suffrage of others. And so we need to start rethinking. COVID for me has actually been, it's sad to say in some cases, but there's so much silver linings to this. In some cases, remember on the Mauna, every day for the AHA, 3 times a day, we were calling and praying for dramatic change, hulihia, drastic transformations. We were calling for the systems, these overarching powers that were not pono, that was not bringing pono for the Mauna, for the people, that we needed those systems to fall. We needed to rise up at the same time. We need to kukulu, something better, something that will work better for all. Well, how did we think that was going to come about? Yeah, especially when we say hulihia. Hulihia isn't a transitional change. Yeah, hulihia is drastic, like an eruption. You could be hiking on that mountain, and the next day that thing is exploding with fire and lava. Drastic. So COVID, when you kind of go into a high view and kind of look at it in an overarching way, it kind of did that. It brought so much of world governments to a slow. It demanded that they have to look and listen to the well-being of their citizens. It is making everybody look back home. One of the biggest things that COVID gave back to many is time. I know we can think of it if we're thinking in others, like, oh my God, I'm stuck with my family inside. Well, when was the last time we were really deeply with our family? Parents, oh my God, I'm not going to get my kids to school. Well, here now comes the reality that of every child's first and main teacher is the parent. Yeah? What is it to actually be a parent of a child and take on the responsibility of not just paying the bills, keeping the roof over their head, and food in the belly, but actually nurturing the mind, the body, the spirit of a child? Yeah, what is it really? We are being put back into a stage like the time of our kukuna, where the primary teachers and kuleana is for the keiki, not to sit in front of video games all day, or to only be out gallivanting with friends or shopping at the mall, or even sitting for 8 hours a day in a school, but being with their family again, to actually be able to listen fully and spend that deep time with kupuna, with their family, to tell these stories. Yeah, we're actually COVID is kind of pushing us into the direction of everything that we've been calling for sustainability. Yeah. So day-to-day practice is kind of happening. We can think like we're being forced into it, but a little bit kind of, good, that we have to spend time with our family, that we have to rethink that, oh gosh, you know what? We don't want all these people flying over here and everything too, so I guess we need to create a more sustainable economy, huh? Yeah, that's what we've been saying for a long time. Oh, there's a shortage of food. Food is, how we're going to get to that? Well, maybe we should start more small community gardens. Maybe I don't need such a big, massive yard of grass. Maybe I can plant some vegetables and actually learn about where food comes from. The most essential things, COVID is actually demanding and kind of pushing us to actually pay attention to. Yeah, cleanliness of self, taking care of all these things. So I would say all those main points, those small things that we can do are good. But at this time, really on the day-to-day, we need to practice all that. But that's also, remember that those little things, change the light bulb, don't use the plastic so much, recycle, that's not enough. Okay, that is not enough. We are already to that point that there is no small little fixing anymore. That should have been done 50 years ago, but nobody really took it seriously. And I'll admit it too. And I always, when I looked at my mom, I said, "Mom, you guys done messed up." You didn't do enough. And so then that makes me look at myself, am I doing enough? We need to be heavily gearing our whole life, targeting our shifting. We don't need any more rich people. We don't need any more of, really think about what, for all you young ones, really, when people talk about what you want to be when you grow up, I gotta start being I'm being more strict with all of my students and my young ones around me. It's like, okay, it's not about what you want anymore. We already had too many generations doing about what they wanted to do. It's not about want anymore. We all need to be of service. So let's look at these targets. We need to start gearing ourselves and lining our lives up to help to save this planet. Yeah. So we need to. It's not like, oh, well, I don't know if we can cut down on the plastics too much because, you know, I need my Coca-Cola. Oh, really? So you need the diabetes. Okay. So we're going to continue to build the plastic. For what? Because the problem isn't just about, you know, for example, we're going to recycle the plastic bottle. Okay, but they're still making plastic bottles. Now, a Coca-Cola is mandated that every single one of their bottles need to be recollected and that plastic has to be reused for Coca-Cola bottles, and they're not allowed to gather any more fossil fuel plastics. You cut off using any more fossil fuels. That's the goal. But just taking more fossil fuel, making plastic, turning that plastic into something else as a second life, okay. However, the problem is still coming. So a little bit of small fixing is not enough anymore. Yes, continue those. We have to exemplify those, but we need more bigger drastic changes for sure. Sorry.
Mahalo. I know that it is getting harder to use reusable things because of COVID-19. Thank you for sharing about how we need to rise up and change and pointing out some of the positives of what we're going through right now.
Mahalo, Haley. That was a really good question. Our next question comes from Chloe.
How realistic do you think it is for the government to implement the use of more 100% more or 100% renewable energy sources, and what impact would that have on the land and other natural resources?
I think when it comes to realistically for the government, I don't have any. I don't believe it's going to happen. Not anytime soon. The government is too overrun, especially our current government, especially on the federal level. Like I said earlier about those that benefit from the political powers, it's just those who benefit from the scheme. Some they benefit from war. So you look behind these companies that create weapons of war, a lot of them are. So I don't give any trust that the government's going to change it. I give trust that we can start to get more people in that can help it. But the big thing is, even myself, I'm running for a political office this year. However, I know that I want to do the best I can there, but I'm not going to keep my hopes up there. My full focus is that it has to be every citizen. Every citizen needs to take responsibility and needs to start taking control, demanding that not only the government, but start investing in ourselves. One of the most difficult things when it comes to actually looking toward the government to
Lanakila, I think you're breaking up. I don't know if you can hear me.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, getting a little bit better. Yep, there you go. Yeah, that's better.
I just went to that one little bad spot.
Yeah, no.
Okay. So, I think I was just rewind a little bit, I would say. So again, looking at those government officials and policies and such that exist right now, there's so much work to do to get the right people in, to begin to chip away at all those layers that protect the dirty industries. So we need the community, everyday people need to take more charge in how we're going to and invest even into these green energies and sustainable technologies and such. And governments in a lot of ways, they try to always maintain monopolies. Yeah, they support the large, big power industry opposed to what we need. Like I was kind of talking about, what's kind of been the common theme here, is the smaller, tighter, sustainable communities. So that's where we're starting to look at initiatives. And Hawaii is just a great example, a great place to try to experiment with these options. Microgrids, for example, for power. Looking at microgrids, where you are not creating massive amounts of power at one power plant in one state and then having to do a whole series, hundreds and hundreds of miles worth of electric lines passing over mountains and deserts and through communities to get power to a city hundreds of miles away. Actually, in the process of distributing power like that, you lose a lot of power. A lot of power is wasted in the distribution of it. So if you're able to create healthier, localized green energy grids and power systems, and that only feed the surrounding community right there, one of the best options we can go to. And that's something that we can do in the private sector, that we can do in our own communities. I think I have more hope to see more activation in the communities directly, starting to shift the government in that way. But I don't hold much hope that the government's going to lead in that way.
I think we're losing it a bit. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
I'm home. I want to get back on my Wi-Fi.
Okay. I know, guys. Isn't this awesome? Hearing all this, right? I know, Chloe. Yeah. Yeah, give Uncle a minute. He'll jump back on.
Check.
Yep, there you are.
How's that? Okay, Kalamai. I'm back on my Wi-Fi, so we're good now.
No.
Yeah, home on Wi-Fi.
Chloe, did you want to continue with your questions? Yeah, can you hear us?
Yeah. Kalamai, I don't know where we might have got cut off there.
I think we heard most of. I mean, we heard most of what you were saying. I think a little bit of patches here and there, but
okay. I think the bulk of it. I think my ending point though is that I think I don't really feel the government is going to lead that. The community, the people, we need to lead that initiative and force the government to fall into place.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. Like a lot of the things you see, like with people in the community, like when they talk about politics, you see like complaining about how much they don't like it. And I think giving empowerment to people to do something about what they don't like about it and what they can change for themselves, like what you're doing, running for office, and like maybe taking on something like that for yourself if you care about it that much for it to change. Another part of my question was, how long do you think it would take for this kind of change to happen? For like you said, picking at the layers of everything that's wrong.
In the government, Hmm. You know, it's difficult. Everything happens in 4-year cycles, yeah, when it comes to the government. But you know, I'm actually, you know, I'm going to say I am going to give some. I'm going to throw some more hope that way, because I think what we're starting to see is more engagement. I would just say just this morning I was notified that here in Hawaii we have already seen record numbers of participation this year. Numbers of people voting that have never voted in their life. This time last year, 2 days before the primaries, like even in Honolulu, only about 30% of ballots came in. This year, and that's about been the norm for Hawaii. This year already, 2 days before the primaries, they have 57% in Honolulu. So we're seeing a lot more engagement. So I am gonna throw some hope that way, that the more that is one way that we're able uh, for the community to engage. The people need to take back charge of their government. That means they need to participate in that government. So I think we're, you know, it's a sad thing, but I think it happens so much with people, with humans, that we don't really get in there until our back is up against the wall. So I think more people are really suffering and really feeling that threat, that they're going to push now. You know, they're going to fight. We're getting into that mode. I just hope that we can do it in a peaceful way. What you guys are experiencing there in Portland, that is an example of the people finally just having enough and putting their foot down. It's unfortunate that it's taking to a point of where we're seeing we see how the government is reacting. Instead of listening to their people and engaging, you're seeing how the federal government responded. So that's part of human history, though. We hope that we should be getting more better on how we resolve our problems, but we are still having to deal with a big portion of our populations that don't think in such a way, that they will jump more to the force, or using force opposed to diplomacy, and or especially doing their jobs of listening to their constituents, having those important dialogue. So the more that we get those people, the community that is engaging even from the outside, the more that we can get those like-minded leaders into positions of leadership and governance, we can start to see that change. As far as the timeline, that's difficult to see, but I will say timeline of seeing changes like that amongst the people, I can see that happening pretty quick, because we're starting to galvanize, and the people we're the ones feeling the brunt. And so I hope everyone who's starting to feel the inconveniences, I would say you only feeling inconvenienced right now, because for those who are just starting to feel the inconvenience, know that for a lot of us, and I'm one of them too, we've been suffering. While everybody else was comfortable and ignoring the fact because they were comfortable, many people have been suffering. The environment has been suffering. So many people have been struggling, and only now it's uncomfortable for some, now they're going to engage. It's a little bit like, well, it's about time. But that's another little blessing in disguise of what COVID has done. It's forced those who are comfortable to pay attention to the same issues that many of their fellow neighbors have been dealing with for a long time.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah, with everybody realizing that change needs to happen, you definitely see it a lot now, and hopefully it will be more long lasting and not a short term kind of thing, and people will feel the impacts more, especially now that everybody's home and feels everything that's going on. Also, regarding like the other half of my question about renewable energy sources and like those kind of technologies, how would like the installation of them and stuff impact the land that they occupy, and like how would native resources or native like plants or animals be affected by things like that, like wind farms or dams created in rivers?
Uncle, you're muted.
Okay. Again, taking that initiative that everybody does their research, that there are so many different amazing green, like truly green, clean technologies out there, and they've been around for a long time. How we can get these things, these energies, sources out and at the forefront is we the people, we need to invest and support them. Because some of them, they address even the situations that we've been dealing with, some of the green energy giants again. So now we're starting to see the same business kind of poor practice and monopolization happening in the green sector as we're seeing in the dirty in energy sector. Here in Hawaii, you know, kahuku was a big thing last year where the people were fighting against windmills. Kind of like, it was like windmills are supposed to help be part of our answer to the problems, but these large corporate businesses who have the control and how they're pushing their technology, it's not about helping the people, it's about making money. And the windmills get bigger and bigger and bigger. They're putting them right next to, of course, the smaller native communities. You don't see these down in Hawaii Kai, you know, where you have a lot more of the wealthy and other races, but where a lot of the Polynesians are in the smaller community, that's where they're going to stick these giant windmills. That, and you know, it's stated too, large windmills should be absolutely nowhere near, no closer than a mile to any residences or buildings. They have some of these giant windmills. These are the largest windmills in the United States now, and some of them are within 700 feet of the schools. You're seeing the same type of poor business and greedy business practices now creeping into the green energy fields. So that's where the people got to be more active. So and start looking at, you know, how can we introduce our green energies that are needed like that, without having a negative impact. That's the point of your question. But there are types, that's where we have to look at, there are other alternatives. So I'm investing in a company that has a completely different wind turbine, that they looked at all the problems and the risk of the traditional large windmills, and their mission was to create a turbine that is void of those problems. And they've been successful, but they are now our threat to that bigger windmill industry, so they are not getting that support, right? So they've created a turbine. One of the problems with the turbines, they put it right into the paths of where a lot of our native birds fly, where the native opia, the Hawaiian hoary bat flies, and they're saying, oh, it's not going to be much more of an impact. Yet at the same time, they're applying to the state for permits that the state gives to be able to kill so many native or endangered species a year. It's like, what? So they've actually, the flower tulip turbine, it has a completely different way that it turns, that it's not a dangerous blade like this. They have been able to compact this power and change it. So one thing we see, another problem with wind farms as they exist now, is those giant propeller wheels. When the wind comes into those, it distorts the wind pattern when it comes out. So that's why you can't have them closer together, and why they end up taking up so much space. Because one windmill in front will distort the wind pattern, and it actually will take away the wind from the next one. So that's why they take up so much room, and they're so big and they're so farly spread apart. This technology, I would say new, but it's been around for a while. They actually have changed the shape of it, where one turbine you can actually cluster them all together. And the way that it's shaped, it actually will take in the wind and actually discharge or throw the wind back out to actually feed the next turbine. So they're alleviating all these problems, and they've even condensed them down. They're maybe 10 foot tall turbines. They actually look like a piece of art. They can sit on rooftops. They can sit on the medians in highways. They can sit on all these giant big box stores and shopping malls and We need to be able to take charge and be more intelligent and not expanding our footprint even with our green energies. A wonderful thing I've seen too is instead of taking up acres and acres of land for wind farms, there's acres and acres of big old blistering hot parking lots and shopping center roofs and everything that could be covered instead. And there's tax initiatives and stuff that people can be intelligent about how they do that. So, but again, that's that creative ideas that the community needs to grab onto and then literally invest and support to make those and bring those kind of clean technologies forward, support those small this small tech that actually would be better for us but aren't getting the big backing because they are now being oppressed by the larger industries taking charge as well. So it's a big circle story, but in the end for me it always comes back down to the people need to be the advocates and the investors.
Yeah, because like the way that big companies can get big is because so many people invest in that company and so many people give so much to it. And the only way for them to not have as much power as they do is if people realize the problem. And definitely if there's so much new technology and so much innovation happening, we should be able to solve the issue of like the problems that exist with the technologies that are being used.
I just remind everybody, the hydroelectric car was created almost 50 years ago. Water. So what's going on? Why are we still driving with fossil fuels when the hydroelectric vehicles were created 50 years ago? That's the business part that we have to take the power away from.
Thank you.
Mahalo, Chloe, for those questions. They were really good questions, and it's really important to notice how actually the big companies are actually trying to change so they understand what the people are fighting for. We have a section on taking.
And we force that change. I'm going to say it to that. We force them to change when we vote. We let them know with our dollars. Yeah. If we're like, hey, I'm not going to give you my business, that's how you force them to listen to you.
We have a section on taking action and a question from Ku'ule.
Hi, aloha. My question is, what are some sources that our society can use in order to continue the legacies of our elders while creating awareness through sustainable living?
Some sources, as in, what do you mean sources?
Like books, like documents that have like stories that tell us about the land, or even maybe educational art pieces, just things that we can use to educate ourselves.
Hula, number one. Hula is one of the best. Yeah. You know, it's kind of difficult. I've never really been a student of literature, oddly enough. I've greatly been a student of hula and through traditional chant in that way. So, but I've been tapped into a number of different books. I know when it comes to our Hawaiian history and such, a really good one for me is actually my door slamming. For me, a very important one is the Mo'olelo of Hi'iaka. The whole trilogy of Hi'iaka i Kapoliopele is a very interesting one because it talks about overcoming challenges. You know, the Mo'olelo of in the stories of how she faces the mo'os, how she takes on these mo'os, is an example of all these different kinds of challenges that this young girl needs to go through that can be looked at changing political structures. Yeah, facing off with spiritual spiritual conflicts within herself, facing, even the concept of finding her strength as a female, as a young woman in society, and many times facing up against things that everyone would tell her there's no way that you would be able to beat that, and yet somehow she finds a way to be successful. Yep. So the Pele and Hi'iaka saga is amazing. That whole ka'au is very uplifting. I would say, since there's so many wahine here too, I really encourage you guys to look at the mo'olelo of La'iei Kawai. La'iei Kawai, when you really analyze that story through a different lens. I really want you to think about what you're looking at. The romances of La'iei Kawai. Everyone gets stuck in all the love stories. Like, oh wow. But look at it through an eyes of La'iei Kawai. If you were La'iei Kawai, this young girl who was told her whole life that she would be nothing unless she marries somebody with everything. Yeah, you're nothing unless you're given this from somebody. And in the end of it all, what gives her lift and her status as a goddess is not from anybody else. It's through her own life experiences. And in the end, she marries nobody. And that's when she's elevated. Yeah. So, but to look at that whole mo'olelo, the makavalu that in different ways, that's a very, very strong one. I think that, and I think what I'm alluding to here right now is all this change that we want to see when it comes to sustainability and for fighting for our environment. None of these efforts will take place until we, every single one of you find that confidence that you can make the difference, that you are important to this story, that you are important to what needs to be done. That's a big part of something I am so mahalo that my kumus did to me. They're like, not you, better figure it out. And sometimes we're like, oh my God, they're not helping me. No, we're demanding that you take, they're demanding I take that path. Because I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm not going to make it easy on you. You need to walk that path. I'm not going to tell you the answer. I want your mind to contemplate through all these different levels. And so that's a big thing I stand as. Everyone needs to realize that you are part of the solution, that you are necessary for the changes to happen. And yeah, those are some of the strongest ones that for me have been very impactful in my life. I think another real nice, let's see, one more I want to, where'd it go? I want to share. So one thing is we can have the Ike of our kupuna Hawaii, yes. But to have a strong foundation of who you are is very important as you continue to take in lessons and influences and mo'olelo and art and stuff from wherever you are. So I would say I am really who I am today greatly because of the stories I learned from also a lot of the Native American tribes that I worked with when I was young. By exchanging, in the cultural exchanges I had, sometimes, in some situations, some of their stories actually helped to fill a gap of understanding for me in my own mo'olelo. They gave parallels of understanding the world too, and how, we're raised over here thinking, I think everybody's kind of raised thinking that you're the center of the universe, yeah. But but here in Hawaii, everybody kind of has a tendency to like, how come us in Hawaii? How come they're not? It's like, because we one speck in the ocean, and we gotta realize that sometimes we're not on everybody's #1 list. So in that, how can we make ourselves of importance? Yeah, our culture has something to give, and many cultures have contributed so much to civilization. Yet, of course, we're dominated by one narrative, yeah, one particular occupier's narrative that's the one. But really, everybody has something to give. So being strong and having a grounded foundation in the aspects of who you are and understanding your strengths and collecting those mo'olelo, for me, that's when it is best, once you have a firm foundation and continue to bring in influences and guidance from others, because then you have something to parallel it. You really can connect with that over there because you have that parallel understanding of self, or from self, from your own foundation, from your own connection. The parallels is so important, because if you don't have a firm foundation, then what tends to happen is like, oh, we don't have nothing, we don't want nothing over here, we gotta go ask them, we gotta go bring it in from here. That's not sustainable either. Yeah. And that's an unfortunate thing we see with a lot of happening in Hawaii, when here in Hawaii, where Hawaiian people or even just children growing up in Hawaii are not taught of their own backyard and their own history of this place, that they are then made to feel like, well, there's nothing for us here. I gotta go. I gotta leave because there's nothing for me here. That is also a process of colonization, to get people to feel disenfranchised of their own existence so that they leave. So then more can come from someplace else and occupy that space. Yeah. So I think by having a firm foundation, and that's also including your own family histories, yeah, and the good and the bad. Always remember that, everybody. Even sometimes, I know some of our kupuna like, oh, we don't talk about that person. But that person, even in the negative part of what they might have done, or everybody know, like, there's a lesson to be learned. Even some kinds of, okay, we understand the hanaino or the heva that somebody did. And therefore that story is important, that I always remember that so I don't make that mistake again, or that does not repeat itself, or I recognize the signs of something like that so we can not make sure it doesn't happen. Yeah. So building your foundation of who you are. Yeah. That's why hula is important, because you're not just reading. Yeah. You are physically engaging in that mo'olelo. Yeah. You are physically engaging with your surroundings, mentally, physically, spiritually. Yeah. And that's how it helps to increase us. And with that, when you are able to understand that, that's when you can draw resources of wisdom and knowledge from anything, because you learn how to extract and find information. I tell you, I've learned a lot from movies. You can just look at it, oh, it's Steven Spielberg, it's really a great movie. But if you look at it in the right mind frame, there's powerful lessons. So for me, some of the most powerful lessons that I've learned in some cases, that I would recommend to you, and you'd be like, what? Go watch the movie Matrix. Go watch, I know you guys young, you're like, what? Watch the movie Avatar. Not, the blue alien one. I tell you, that movie is the story of indigenous people retold in another way. Yeah. Another very powerful movie that has so much kauna, you got to look deep, yeah, that has this kauna, especially when we're approaching in political arenas. Go watch the Hunger Games again. But watch these movies with your hula lens, with that lens of looking for kauna. Yeah, that's where the importance of not about just give me resources, is learn how to extract information and look through multiple layers, that makavalu. Yeah, then you'll be able to find resources all over and all around you through so many different cultures. You get through all that. So
Thank you. That was very insightful. I hadn't really thought of using resources that way, and it was really interesting to hear about how you can find like resources and lessons in like different things that can seem totally unconnected to what you're trying to think about and contemplate about. So thank you. That was really interesting, and I'm sure us younger kids would find it maybe a little bit more interesting by using these different types of resources instead of, like, as you said, you don't really like to read. Maybe this might be a good way for us to find some more knowledge about our history and sustainability.
I like to read. I just find that that's not my main source of my main resource thing. I tend to pull from the world around me. And as a Kanaka, I'm very hands-on, visual, and oral. I listen very intently. But I would say a real quick one too, as an example. So if you guys really take some time to think Hi'iaka and the Hi'iaka saga, and then go watch the Hunger Games. Yeah, it's like parallels. This young girl having to go through all of these struggles. Yeah, it's like she has to face mo'os. She get these challenges, things that So think of our mo'olelos, and then you find a parallel. And then with this, you're gonna find other stories of other young women who have had to face different things. And then you'll start to find, in reality, you're gonna see women in your life or in the world, in history, or even alive today, and you're like, wow, that's a Hi'iaka energy. That's that woman who is fighting through. She's gonna get those moles out of the way because she's find your Hi'iaka-ness.
Mahalo.
Hi.
Mahalo for that question, Kulei. It was a really good one. And now we have a question from Nicholas.
Lanakila, how can others continue to koku or help their children in learning about the science significance of their culture or identity? Sorry.
No. Can you say that first part again?
Yes. How can others continue to koku or help their children in learning about the significance of their culture or identity?
How can we kokua? Yeah. First one. So for all of our makua, our kupuna, and all you opios out there, remember, everyone is a teacher by birth. When you were born, you were teaching your mara something already. Yeah. When every aspect, as much as you are a student, and I always say that I'm always be a student. Yeah? And in that, I've always been a teacher. As a student, you help to teach your kumus. As a child living, you help to teach your community. Yeah? As an adult, as you grow up as an opio, yeah, you are a teacher to every young person looking up at you. So that principle. I remember being taught that when I was really young, and it always made me feel like, okay, you got you hula peeps, being the frontline dancer. Yeah, you all frontline. Just always think yourself as being frontline. That means what? All eyes on you. There is no hiding in the background. You always gotta be on. Okay. You are being watched constantly. Yeah. And as you might feel, as we are all continuing to learn, sometimes people are learning from observing how you are learning. Yeah, that's the big point of a student teaching teacher. Yeah, and I always find my best kumus are those who always say I'm always continuing to learn. Yeah, that's when you don't become just stuck in one ways and that's it, and then there's no growth and it just becomes stagnant. Yeah, but continuous growth. And I say that too, of knowing that you already have the kuleana. So therefore, by being conscious that you have that kuleana, you then want to take on that responsibility, and then you want to be sure to model the best practice, because the best teacher teaches by example. Yeah, teaches by exempling these things, by exercising these things, not the kind just, I'm just going to regurgitating information. Yeah, sometimes you get people who are given a title as teacher and all they're doing is puking information onto you that they just read out of a book, just watched off a video, or that someone just gave them the instructions, here, go tell them that. But if they're not actually part of that or engaging or connected to it, it's not really a lesson. It's not really a tangible teaching. So the best way anyone can kokua someone in learning the culture is to be example of the culture. Now, what does that mean? In some cases, it was like, well, I don't really know. Grab something and just just do it. Yeah. And there's in some cases where you don't have a practitioner with you, well, then you just got to figure it out. I'm going to keep talking, but I'm looking for my charger. You know, in some cases, I mean, you have to think like if you know, it's not an example, it is a reality. Charger. There's been times where families lose the kupuna or the person with that wisdom and knowledge. So what you gonna do? Just sit down for the next 4 generations and, oh, that was sad, we lost that. Or do you pick up a practice, even though it might only be a fragment, and you just exercise it the best you can? Yeah, and try to bring it to life, bring life to that, rebirth it. That's the whole concept of hi'iaka. Sorry, going back to that again. Well, she's just a great example. Hi'iaka is rebirthing out of loss. Yeah, where some might look at the lava flow and the pele, that destructive force, as destructive force, and that, oh, now we don't have what we had before, it's lost. Well, hi'iaka is the energy that comes and blesses or brings life back to that, and it begins the sprouting of the new seeds, and then life grows again. Is the forest going to be exactly the same as it was before? No, but the forest has to grow. Yeah. So when we, you know, sometimes we get stuck sometimes with these mantras that, you know, it has to be an unbroken line or else it's fake after that. I don't think our kupuna even thought in that way. Yeah? I believe that they truly were like, you have to continue to grow. You need to continue to cultivate. It's good to have a foundation of learning. But if you have no access, or that accessibility or the opportunity does not exist for you to gain that, to have that lesson, but you know it's something that's needed, well, by goodness, just take it on and try figure it out. You know, in some cases, some of the best people in our histories learned on their own. There was no kumu for them. There was no process or something that they got to go through. They just had to figure it out on their own. Yeah. So in that case, I say that because I know for a lot of our people, they don't have access to all these different aspects. You know, you might want to, you know, you might feel like, you know, I really, really want to take on sustainability. You know, I've read or I've seen and I heard about, you know, the people used to feed the fish and everything, but I don't know anybody who's doing that anymore. I don't know anybody to go to or what. But if you can find any little fragments of information, put it together, get out there and try it. Start to feed the fish again. Yeah, and you're going to go through your trials, and you know, you're going to be successful, you're going to be unsuccessful, and be open to figuring out the process. Yeah, and bring a lot of cultural practices we lost. Okay, I share this with a lot of people too. The makahiki things that we watch today, or that we see, like, you know, the schools going out makahiki, playing games, they get the lono banner thingy. Even the island of Koho'olawe, how they have their makahiki, that is not how the makahiki ceremonies were in the days of old. It wasn't like that. But you know what? We needed that energy back. We needed that lono energy back. And rather than just say, well, it's gone, so it's gone, our kupuna in the past said, you know what? Well, then we need to recreate this. We need to bring it back in some form. Yeah. And we will ho'opono. We will make it part of who we are. And we'll instill that. And blessed that they did. Yeah. So we need to also remember that we are a living culture. We are a living people. So we are not bound by no Gregorian calendar timeline that, oh, it's only Hawaiian or it's only real if it happened, if we have evidence of it happening prior to 1850 or so. We are Hawaiians, right? And those of us who are Hawaiian or whatever culture that you are, if you have that, you have that inherent right to take those pieces that you have left and bring it to life. And if you need to add a new piece, or if you need to remend a piece, do it. Yeah. And that's how, when we start to re-engage with these things, that's where we're going to start to really learn. And it doesn't come from the history book. Yeah. The history book is just to help to give you an image, but that actually lives when we do it. Yeah. Culture lives when it is applied by its people. It's kind of a challenge we're pushing out there right now. For a number of years, we've been seeing the restoration of a lot of our local i'a, or our fish ponds here in Hawaii. Great. But we ain't getting fish from them yet. It was just like this great thing to fix the walls. But as far as actually managing the fish, feeding the fish, bringing in the baby fish, and doing all that, we haven't gotten to that stage yet. Yeah, so it's not quite alive yet. So, but we're getting there, and that's good. Some people, they didn't wait around for permission. They've been living next to this broken wall and hearing stories about it their whole life. And you know what I'm sick of just listening to stories. I want to see this alive and living. And they're going and they're picking up the pohaku and they're putting it back on the wall. And sometimes that's what it takes to get other people to jump in and like, yeah, let's bring it to life. So the best example to help to support the next generation and to be of kokua, of keeping culture alive, is do it. Do it. Engage in it. Don't vaiho kahila hila. Yeah, like we say in hula, aaka hula, vaiho kahila hila makahale. If you're going to dance hula, you got to leave your bashfulness at home. I apply that to everything. Yeah, bring it out. Let's do it.
Thank you, Uncle Lanakila, so much. I learned a lot about and I learned a lot about like perspectives that like I didn't really think of that, and I'm privileged for you to explain and for me to grow as a Hawaiian to like understand more. So thank you very much.
And Nicholas, I'm gonna say this too. As one kane, you get big kuleana. Yeah. Us especially as men in Hawaii, we get big kuleana. Our wahine have had to take the reins for a long time because our kane weren't showing up. Yeah. So I'm super excited that you're even on this call. And Kalama earlier was like, oh, it's all wahine. Yeah? I see what kane. Awesome. Mai kai. So you are already on the steps to fact of being a young man in a society that demoralizes culture, and especially cultural expressions like hula and that practice that takes away from that in our current society today. That you are already taking the bravery to participate. That is awesome. Now holomua, continue, and we need our koa, we need our warriors, we need our protectors back again as well. So good to see you here, young man.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Mahalo for your question, Nicholas. And mahalo for your answer, Uncle Lanakila. It's really cool that now everybody knows why to step in and they just can't stand it anymore. We have a question from Sophia.
Aloha. I think it's really important to talk about rainforests during this conversation too. Deforestation is killing indigenous cultures and practices. Traditions that root back to our ancestors are disappearing. What are ways we can invest in forest rights? Kind of like how palm oil is destroying forests and animals in the tropical regions. What are activists doing to reduce palm oil industry uses?
I would say myself, I'm not familiar with the what initiatives are actually happening for the palm oil industry specifically. I know I have seen a big call. One of the first things, again, like how do we change the big businesses? You got to control them with your dollar. If we continue to buy the products that use palm oil, we are feeding that industry. Yeah. And there's a lot of layers to that too. Now, when we're talking about the rainforest and I know specifically the palm oil industry, a lot of that's down in South America, yeah. And throughout the Americas, there's this, just the political system down there is completely different than what we know, but it's heavily influenced by all kinds of different things, and including the U.S. government. There's ways that they play their damn games of trade and everything, and they oppress certain communities. And that's what they do here a lot. They oppress communities to a point that they will end up sacrificing their own everything in order to survive. Yeah. So you're talking a lot of peoples down there who they are the native peoples of that land, but they are being, the brainwash of that their ways is heathenistic, or those ways are outdated, and they got to get up with the future. And some of them who just are attracted to the glamour of the Western world and modernization of things, but are it's amazing to see so many countries that are so rich in natural resources seem to be so poor. Yeah, like so many places in Africa, we see a lot, and there are definitely some beautiful and powerful cities and countries in Africa, but for the most part, a country that's so rich in resources, you don't see so much of their people getting that support. South America too, a lot of so much natural resources, and we know that we're getting it. Yeah, because you look on a lot of the products that we buy, you'll see those types of industries. Palm oil, for example, as we're talking about now, it's in that, so it's coming from those places. But yet a lot of the workers that you see and hear of in these places, they are not treated, they're not getting equal pay or supported very much at all. So it keeps them in a place of desperation. In some cases, that's what's been happening. The Western world, our comfort, remember this too, the United States has what, 300 million people? Yeah, we only I think we're only like what, 15% of the world population, yet the United States consumes nearly half of the world's resources. So one of the big problems with the US, we're gluttonous. We have taken on a culture of gluttony that we continue to consume and consume and consume. But here's the big thing. We also consume on the expense of others. In some cases, America, the US, has a lot of laws, in some cases environmental laws, and stuff that really picked up when the EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, was formed, that protects a lot of the waters and everything, particularly for communities. So what happened to those companies that were really dirty? They went to other countries that don't have a lot of those kind of protections, like some countries in South America. So American companies go into these other areas, and they will deplete their resources, make a lot of promises of a lot of give back, and in the end, very little goes to the workers, very little go to the people. Yet it's their sacrifice, it's their forests, it's their waters, it's their everything that's getting impacted, and they get peanuts. But the company brings that product back up to the US to sell and makes large profits. It's a really, really big story and big process, and that's it's so horrible. It really is along the ways. But when it comes to approaching the concept of forest in itself, it's the lungs. Forests are the lungs of the planet. The Amazon, and particularly in South America, a lot of those large rainforests are very much credited being the lungs of the planet. And we know, as well as with deforestation, a number of years ago, there was the massive fires in the Amazon. And I'd say, we have to look to how the long-lasting ramifications of deforestation. It destabilizes everything, because in the natural world, which is really the cultural approach and perspective, everything is interconnected. Yeah, the health of the forest in the mountains and everything has a great impact to the health of the ocean. And a lot of people, if they are not educated in this, and especially they don't see the connection. They're like, oh, we're not doing it in the ocean's way. It's hundreds of miles away. It's still connected. Nutrients flows through the waters that flow through the forest and that carries to the oceans. Yeah. Again, here in Hawaii is a great example because we're these small mini islands. We're a microcosm, especially the Hawaiian Islands, because we are so unique with our mountains and such that we have, what is it? I don't know, people change the number all the time, but it's something like 13 out of 16 climate zones of the world can be found right on Hawaii Island itself. We have from high timber forests to high alpine desert ecosystems to your typical desert systems to jungles to valleys to plains to everything. So we have a great little microcosm, like a mini planet right here, a mini continent that we can see the ramifications of change and effect to natural environment very quickly. So big example, Hamakua. We were a land through all our mo'olelos talk about verdant forest, scaling all the way up the mountain, all the way down to the ocean. We were the lands of mo'os here. You know, even the Akua feared to cross through Hamakua lands because the forest was so thick and we had monsters, we had the mo'os, we had all these things. Okay, because it's wide open now. Hamakua, in plenty mele, in the songs, yeah. Hamakua ikavai lele na pali. No, this is the lands of the waterfalls leaping from the cliffs. Go take your boat along the Hamakua coast today. You see plenty of places where we're supposed to have water, but no more water. How come no more water? Well, if you go up higher and you look over, you get all the trees and forest and the eucalyptus trees that they've grown on Hamakua. But above that, nothing. It's barren. The whole pa'u of the mountain, the skirt of the mountain is gone. Poor thing, naked our mountain. The forest, hahai ka'ua ike kumula'au. The forest, or the rain is attracted to the forest. Yeah. The forest pulls in the water and stores the water. So without the forest, the clouds, much of these clouds just pass over Hawaii. And or if we get rain, it just hits the ground and flows right away. You don't have the forest that becomes the sponge, that watershed that holds this water and then slowly releases it, that keeps our streams flowing regularly. So much of our rivers today, they're bone dry only right after a big rain, where before, even when I was younger, I remember a lot more water, where it would rain and it would be caught in so much forest, and as it slowly percolates through the moss, it slowly releases, so there was always a steady stream. Yeah, we just get big flash floods and they're gone in a day. All that water just goes away. But with that release, all that nutrients used to go all the way down to the oceans, feed the fish. Yeah, a lot of our native fish were evolved depending on what comes down off the rivers. And every time you have the fresh waters of the mountains reaching to the ocean, that's the kane meeting with the kanaloa. And kane me kanaloa e kupu eu, the estuaries, yeah, the brackish, that's the most abundant growth that bursts. That's where you get your limu or your seaweed blooms that then feed the small fish, that feed the bigger fish, that feed the big fish. The whole food chain, all of that is getting completely cut off if you don't have the forest in the mountain. Not to mention the whole habitats that the forest creates. Here in Hawaii, we were known as a land of birds. So many of our native birds are either extinct now or on the verge of extinction and critically endangered in less than 200 years from Western contact. Yeah, and all that came with them, all that native insect populations, all these things. So I gave that example. That's how I can understand what's happening in the Amazon, what's happening in these other cases of deforestation, because I know my forest. I know what my backyard forest and how the ecosystem is supposed to work here. So I can understand the parallels of what's happening with these other places. So what can we do legally? There have been some initiatives already that I've heard of to combat global climate change. I've seen some initiatives. What is the name of that group? There's this one group that's down in the Amazon now. They're like literally down there chasing after poachers, tree poachers, and running them down and trying to replant areas that have been illegally harvested and stuff. So I mean, that's the people taking initiative. Yeah. But a big part of that too, sustainability, self-sustainability, when communities and countries are able to take care of themselves. I mean, I think it's ridiculously crazy where you hear so much struggle from people like in Mexico. We always hear it, it's so economically deprived down there. We hear that all the time. Well, we hear that. But at the same time, so much of our own produce is coming from Mexico. I'm wondering, how come the people not getting first dibs at their own food that they grow? Yeah? Something's wrong. And that has to do with policies and bullying. I would say bullying processes from big countries like the US. Remember, I ain't no fan of the US's policies and government. They've been the biggest bullies, yeah, on the planet. Yeah. This young little punk of a country that's barely 200 years old, we're on there making trouble to all these other countries and onto peoples that have existed for thousands of years in a space. Yeah. So now, by threatening with sanctions or different things in other countries, they force their hand for trade, and that in some cases forces smaller countries to deforest more of their land for more cattle, for more agriculture, so they can turn around to be able to try and sell back to a big country to make a profit. So it's a really, really screwed up game where self-sustainability is one of the greatest forms of revolution that the world can have. Yep. If every community was able to feed itself based on and sustain itself, and then have the ability to produce more for a surplus, that's what can be sold and shared outward. But they should not be forced to have to give up the necessities, yeah, or to have to sacrifice the health of their ecosystems in order for them to make a monetary profit. Yeah, that's a real scary thing, that we have been, so many cultures of the world have been coerced into thinking that we need this monetary measurement. Yeah, that we need to acquire this monetary in order to survive, and everything else is able to be sacrificed for that. Yeah. So the people take initiative, sustainability, self-practice, or self-sustainability, and even communal living, or self-contained, what they call circular economy. That's the keyword, circular economy, are ways to offset all of these struggles, even such as deforestation. Yeah, many ways that is a symptom of the capitalism that we're stuck in right now. Oh yeah.
Mahalo. Honestly, it's all about consequences. And it reminds me of, what you said during Maima's question with Americans kind of not knowing what essential is. And, them not really digging deep enough to realize that, like, are they supporting the bullies? Maybe. And I think that's really important. So thank you.
Great question, Sophia. I'm learning a lot today. Before we close today, I'd like to invite our students who helped put this together to introduce themselves. Maima?
Aloha, o Meima ko'u inoa, umikumaha o umakahiki, no Osaka ko'u ohana. Hello, my name is Meima. I am 14 years old. My family is from Osaka, Japan. I am in the Beaverton School District, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
O aloha o koku koinoa, umi kumalima o umakahiki, no Beaverton mai au. Aloha, my name is Coco. I am 15 years old. I'm a sophomore in the Beaverton School District. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Kule?
Aloha, my name is Ku'ule. I am 16 years old, and I will be an incoming junior in the Beaverton School District, and my personal pronouns are she, her, hers.
Sophia?
Aloha, o Sophia Ko'uinoa, umi kumalua o Umakahiki, no Beaverton mai au. Aloha, my name is Sophia. I'm a 7th grader in the Beaverton School District, and I identify as she, her, hers.
Chloe.
Aloha o Chloe Ko'uinoa, Umikumaha o Umakahiki, no Beaverton mai au. Hello, I'm Chloe. I'm 14 years old. I live in Beaverton, and I am going to be a freshman in the Beaverton School District.
Nicholas.
Hi, my name is Nicholas. I'm 14 years old. I'm going to be in 8th grade in the Beaverton School District, and my pronouns are he, him, and they.
Kamalani.
Aloha, my name is Kamalani. I am 11 years old. I go to the Beaverton School District. My pronouns are he, him, his. I identify as Chinese, Hawaiian, and Portuguese. Mahalo.
Haley.
Aloha, o Haley Ko'uinoa, Umikumalima o Umakahiki, no Beaverton mai au. Hi, my name is Haley. I am 15, and I am a sophomore in the Beaverton School District. My pronouns are she, her, and hers.
And Kama'ehu.
Aloha. O Kamaliʻi noa. O Ewalu o Makahiki. And I am at the Beaverton School District, and my pronouns is he, him, his. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui loa, ʻAnakalā Lanakila, and all the youth that joined us today. We hope that today's talk story session has helped you understand and answer many of the questions you also had. Like we said before, we hope to use this platform as a safe space for all youth to come together and talk about the issues that we, a key component of today's society, are faced with as we move into the future. No subject is off limits. We hope to continue these sessions weekly, and we need you, our peers, friends, and family. For more information or ways to get involved, please email kailele@kalohcc.org or visit www.kalohcc.org. Again, mahalo for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Mahalo nui na Kamaliʻi ola.
Mahalo.
Thank you, Uncle.
Thank you.
Mahalo.
Thank you, mahalo. Thank you.
Oh my
Mahalo.
goodness.
Oh, you guys make me so excited for the future. Oh, mahalo, mahalo. Hola, hola.
Mahalo
Okay,
ya
well, you
oi,
guys have a
Lanakila.
beautiful afternoon. Oh, there you. Oh,
Yes.
aloha. Where is this? I want to get my phone, so I gotta scroll back for find everybody.
Oh no.
Oh, there you.
Yeah. Oh, mahalo nui ya oi, mahalo no ko manawa, ko ike, ko aloha, so vai, like, mahalo ya oi.
Oh, mea iti mahalo nui no. Ya la ka ino ke ia hala, right? This is just, and just really, really excited. This is a beautiful, wonderful thing you guys are doing to keep these conversations, and exactly that, to honor and have this safe space. So for all you guys, just really listening to you and speaking so elegantly, my ka'iloa and curiosity. I just want to say that always maintain your curiosity. Curiosity is a door for education. If we lose our curiosity, that's when we disengage from wanting to educate ourselves, and then we become so ignorant. Yeah. So mahalo nui, you guys, so awesome. Mahalo.
Mahalo for your time
Okay.
and Go Oha. Vote on Lanakila for Oha.
Tell all your
Spread
friends
the
and
word.
family.
Spread the
Yeah.
word.
We'll know by tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, I'll know. So
Voting
just
for you.
We sent our vote
mahalo.
already.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lanakila, I don't know if you have a couple more minutes, but we have some of our Haloa Okio on here as well. Did anyone from Haloa have any questions or anything for Uncle Lanakila as well before we let him go? Because he gave us so much of his time today. Does anybody else have anything? Are pretty good? Okay. He covered a lot, so we just wanted to double check.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's recorded, you gotta go back and check. Even I always go back and watch like, what did I say?
I was just sitting listening. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, but Hi'iaka and
How
Hunger Games.
Right? Is it like, whoa? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about it. I was like, oh,
that
did
young
the writer read Hi'iaka and then go right? No, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
A little bit Kuapo, maybe that one part where the little sister was supposed to go and then the big sister wouldn't jump in was a little bit switched like that. But again, no one else like go, and she said, "I'll go." Like talk about the tribute, yeah. Yeah. Go watch all these kind of movies back with your hula brain. Wow, all kind of things come out. Yeah.
Right.
Even the kind Lord of the Rings. Man. Lord of the Rings is a cool one to watch when you makavalu. You can find plenty parallels and plenty mo'olelo in that. And Kauna. R.L. Tolkien, honoring that man, he was an amazing writer. And, I a little bit of history on, you guys watch Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all that. R.L. Tolkien was a man who he was a linguist, one, and he very much appreciated and loved mythology. And I think he was like in England or something, and they pretty much didn't have any of like traditional mythology or mo'olelo like that. So this Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit was a whole based on his creating a mythology for England, sort to say, kind of like that, because it was all destroyed, by Christianity. So there's all these other back books behind that. He actually created a whole history to the elves, a whole history of the dwarves, a whole history of hobbits, and created their languages. Amazing. So to watch that and actually to read the books is great. It's got a lot more stuff, but to watch that with a hula eye, I always say the hula eye because that's the interpretive makabalu eye. And you start to just draw, and it's like, Kauna back in that movie. Yeah.
Now we have to go watch all those movies again. I was like, hula lens. Oh, that's my kumu right there. I think kumu always say hula lens. Where's your hula lens? I'm like, right?
Yeah.
Oh, mahalo nui.
Oh yeah.
So I think
you guys.
and mahalo so much for all your time. I know you're so busy, and mahalo nui loa. From Alahamana. I don't know I told all of them to turn their video on, but yeah, because we have more of them in here. They're just sitting silently. But yeah, they're in here. But mahalo nui loa, and but we've all again, I'm sure. And lucky my kai.
Yeah. Anytime, hit me up.
Mahalo. Okay, well, mahalo nui loa, and we'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day in beautiful Hamakua.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mahalo nui.
Mahalo nui loa.
Mahalo.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Okay.
Bye. Mahalo.
Oh,
Isn't that amazing, guys? Okay, so everybody, let's see here. I know it's long. Let me turn this on 1 second. Hold on. Yeah, turn your guys' videos on. There's fat. Yeah, come on, turn them on.
That was definitely I feel like that was one of our longest Kamaliʻi talk story. But I hope that was inspiring for all of you. Yeah. Anyone now? Did you guys? I think Auntie Steffi said take notes, right?
Did everybody take notes in their journals? Does everyone have at least 3 things to put into their exit ticket today? I feel like you should probably have more than 3 things, but everyone should have at least 3 things to type into their exit ticket this afternoon. Awesome. Okay. Also, yeah, Nicholas?
Never mind, we continue what you're saying, or
Oh no,
sorry.
so just make sure that you guys get that done, right? We want to make sure that you know, and it was kind of nice to kind of mix up the Nakamali'i because then we got to yeah, it's nice to listen, yeah, Liam. It's just he's such a great storyteller and like has so much mana'o to share. So sometimes it's hard to write when you're just like really taking everything in. So no, totally. And as long as like you were listening and like actually taking in what he was saying, you know, that was kind of the main point of this. So that's awesome. And you know, that's really why we said 3 things. It wasn't really just so you get 3 things, but really just to make sure that you're listening and engaging, right? Because like he was saying, right, our mo'olelo are so important for us to be able to move forward, right? To move forward and build and perpetuate a lot of the stuff. So that's kind of the big thing is maybe even if you want to pivot, like I know that some of us might have taken Uncle Lanakila's things and decided that we might want to do something different with our projects, and that's totally okay. If you already submitted one and want to resubmit, that's okay. Auntie Leigh and I will just take a look at them this weekend because I was thinking like, oh, I could have recommended so many different types of projects after listening to Uncle Lanakila today. So if you guys have some other ideas based on some of the things that he shared today, that's totally cool. Like even some of the things about like listening to, you know, making parallels in literature